Welcome, in front of me is a OnePlus 8T, and today I'll go over unboxing along with an overview of the device itself. So, starting off, packaging fairly standard for OnePlus with their quick start guide, glued to the basically outside of the foil. But let's pop it open and try to not just drop it everywhere. There we go, nothing inside of here. And up here we got some paperwork, so we don't really care about that, just immediately to the side. Then we got the phone itself. I'm gonna set it to the side for now. Then we got paper that held the phone, a nice OnePlus case, really like those. Also the inclusion of it is really nice. Then we get a Type-C to Type-C charger, again with the OnePlus color scheme. It looks really nice. And then a fairly good charger. So this is a 45 watt charger, so it will charge your phone really quickly. Also really like the fact that they included this one, and I also like the fact, actually it says that it's 65. It's kind of weird considering it says warp charge 65, but on here it says max 45 watts. I'm not really sure what's going on here. But I kind of like the fact that they changed the boxy aspect of their previous chargers to this a little bit more like Apple-like shape. It's really nice in this case, the way it's designed right now. I really like it. And well, I also like the fact that it is a fairly capable charger. And outside of the charger and cable, there is nothing inside of here anymore, so I'm just gonna set that to the side for now. And then we got the phone itself, so just take it out of the foil. And there we go. Now I did set it up already, so we don't have to do that and go through it. So you can clearly see the display. I'm gonna quickly change maybe the wallpaper to something a little bit more interesting, or something that will show off the wallpaper a little bit, or the screen a little bit better. See what we got here. Now while I'm looking for some interesting wallpaper, maybe I'm gonna touch upon the screen. So this is a 6.5 inch fluid AMOLED display with a resolution of 1080p by 2400, and the fluid, I assume, stands for the fact that this is 120 Hz display, so you're gonna be getting a really nice display right here. The fact that it is a 120 Hz AMOLED display just makes this device one of the more premium devices, at least in terms of like how it looks like and feels to use it. Even though the price tag isn't necessarily that high compared to other ones. Now I believe these wallpapers are the stock ones. As you can see, they're fairly nice. So yeah. Also the front of the device and the back has Gorilla Glass 5, and the frame is aluminum. And the display comes at 87% screen to body ratio. We only have a hole punch camera right up here, which you can see, which is the only obstruction on the display. And also when it comes down to the resolution, it is a 402 pixels per inch. So again, fairly dense display, and also fairly normal for 2020 phones. Majority of them came with about 400 pixels per inch on average. That also includes flagships along with the mid-range devices. So yeah, now moving on to the cameras. At the front, it's a fairly okay 16 megapixel wide sensor that shoots at 1080p 30 frames. So nothing really mind-blowing right here. And at the back, the main sensor is a 48 megapixel sensor. Again, wide. Then we have a 16 megapixel ultra wide, 5 megapixel macro, and the lens that I would say is completely useless and basically not worth almost mentioning is the 2 megapixel depth. Now I'm also gonna go into the macro. We'll see if that macro can do anything, or is it just there for pixel count, I guess, because plenty of manufacturers, including OnePlus, have been guilty of including basically useless lenses on their devices. Now there is already one useless lens for sure. It's the 2 megapixel depth sensor, and we'll see if the 5 megapixel macro can do better photos than, for instance, the 48 megapixel wide sensor. Most of the time when you have the macro lens, they are either 2 megapixel or 5 megapixel, and most of the time the main sensor captures better macro shots by zooming in than the macro lens itself can. So like I said, they're basically useless for the most part, but we will see how it will turn out right here. So let's just get our little prop right here, my cactus, and let's open up the camera. Just right over here. So this is gonna be, I believe, the 48 megapixel. I'm just gonna quickly maybe check in the settings just to be sure. There we go. Now it's 48 megapixels. Now right off the bat, I do have to say it's a little bit, there we go, that will look a little bit better. Okay, now let's go look for I'm looking for the macro. I'm having trouble with even finding the macro here. That's ultra wide. Let's say zoom. Can't even seem to find the macro here. There we go. So apparently we need to drop it to 12 megapixel and then we can turn on macro, or super macro as it's called here. So let's get it close in there. If I get it closer, it gets blurry. This is about as close as I can get. Okay. So let's zoom it in and see what we get. So this is the macro shot, and it is okay, I would have to say. And this is the 48 megapixel. Okay, this is 48 megapixel is better. Hands down, there is no comparison. If you zoom in really closely, you can see kind of these threads right here. Something that I don't think you can see right over here. They look a little kind of blurry. So yeah, hands down, 48 megapixel does better macro shots. Now, just as a fun comparison, let me quickly set that to the side and bring my outdated phone that actually has still, I think, to this day, one of the best macro lenses that I have used. Let me quickly just wipe the sensors. So this is the Mate 20 Pro, and like I said, hands down one of the best sensors for macro that I have used so far. And I can already see that this still is the case right now. Oops. I could get rid of this. Stop it and go back to super macro. There we go. So just as a comparison, and this is gonna be a macro, an actual macro shot, and there is basically no comparison whatsoever to these photos. You can basically see the textures right here of the plant itself, something that you can't see on either of those almost. There's a little bit maybe right here, but it's too far, and if you try to get it closer it gets blurry here. This is just ages better than what this device can capture. Now, like I said, my phone has a dedicated macro lens for it, and it does it really well, which I haven't encountered any phone at the moment apart from I haven't encountered any phone that can capture better macro shots than my device at the moment. And I have had a fairly decent amount of phones here over the time, so yeah, still nothing can compete to this, and the macro shot that is right here, it's not even good, I would say. If you plan to advertise that your device has 4 lenses and one of them is a macro lens, at least do it right. This device has no macro lens by all intents and purposes. If you can use a 48 megapixel to capture a more detailed shot than the macro itself can, then you don't have macro lens really. And also the depth sensor is just useless there. You could also remove it and not have it, so in theory, or well, not in theory, in practice, you actually have 2 lenses at the back, not 4. So this is something that, like I said, manufacturers do. It's a little bit scummy that they basically try to rack up the count of the cameras at the back just so the device looks better on paper, but in reality just utter garbage what they're included in terms of cameras, and it's more of an insult to you rather than a useful hardware that you pay for. But when it comes down to the main sensor, it does shoot at 4K 30 and 60 along with 1080p 3060 and also slow motion of 240, so that is nice at least. But yeah, this is the main sensor, and it, as you already seen, it does fairly good photos actually. This is by all intents and purposes a really decent photo. The lighting of it is a little bit darker, at least in terms of the green, and more saturated, but it still came out really nice, I have to admit, and I do like it. Also, as you can see, the blurring effect does have a little bit of a problem here. As you can clearly see it right over here. This is something that still should be in normal circumstances clear, but it does this weird bokeh effect, which just uses AI or whatever it is using, but it doesn't do it really well. As you can see, it kind of mistakes the pines, or whatever you want to call those needles, for the background, and it blurs it out. The ones that are on the front are okay, but the further they go, the device just can't distinguish it too much. So yeah. Okay, and moving on to the last part, which is the actual specs of the device. So it comes with a Snapdragon 865. So it's not the newest Snapdragon, but it's a, well, fairly capable processor anyway. It also has 2 variants, so it has a 256 gigs with 12 gigs RAM, and the lower one with 128 gigs and 8 gigs of RAM. Now, if you need more than 128 gigs, then you do have to go for the higher end of it, and also pay more for the RAM, because there is no expandable storage on it. So like I said, if you need more than that, you can't expand it further, so you're stuck with buying either the higher end or the lower end model. But at least in terms of the storage, it does come with a UFS 3.1, which will make transfer and just read-write speeds of this storage blazing fast, to basically as equivalent to an SSD. So that is really nice here. And then the device comes with a 4500 mAh battery, and like I said before, the 45 watt charger, Also has an under display fingerprint reader and basically everything else that you'd expect from any kind of mid-range or flagship device, meaning like the gyroscopes, GPS and all that stuff, NFC, it's all here. So the thing that isn't here is a headphone jack. So if you still rely on a headphone jack, I do have to say there is none. So you'll be forced to use headphones, wired one, or wireless, or some kind of Type-C to a headphone jack conversion, which aren't necessarily the best alternative, I would say. I personally don't like them. And lastly, the device has several colors. So it comes with aqua green, lunar silver, and also I guess it probably is going to be a limited version, the Cyberpunk edition, which I really would have hoped that this would have been the Cyberpunk edition that I could have reviewed, but it's not, so a little bit of a shame here. And I will mention that Cyberpunk edition looks completely different than this, while the silver and green are just colors. Cyberpunk edition is looks like a completely different device. So yeah. And like I think mentioned before, the device comes at a fairly reasonable price, at $540 around, give or take, maybe like 10, depending when you buy it. And for this price, I have to say this is a decent device, even though it basically advertises two useless cameras that you can't really use or aren't worth using. Everything in here is worth the money. Now, you don't have, for instance, Qi charging. If you still want to use that, you don't have it. A little bit of a shame, but personally, with a 45-watt charger, you're gonna charge your phone way quicker with the cable rather than the charger itself, like the wireless ones. So I do understand why they went with without it. It would kind of undermine the charger that they included, or undermine the hardware that it would include, in terms of the fact that, well, it comes with a beefy charger. But the key selling point for me is the display. So like I said, it's a 6.5-inch AMOLED display with 120 Hertz for a reasonable price. I would also love to see it be curved. I just kind of like curved displays. As you can probably see based on my already fairly damaged device. I do like it, and I would really like to see it here. It would add this premium feel to it further than it already has. But for $540, this is an amazing device, and basically has everything that you would like or need from a device. It captures good photos, has an amazing display, and hands down, it's a really good device. I would recommend getting it if you're on the market for a I would say flagship device, but this isn't necessarily a flagship device. It's, like I said, missing a couple of features, but it's fairly close, and the price is just undeniably better than anything else that you can get. So at $540, you won't have much options with a high refresh rate AMOLED display, devices, and a Snapdragon 865. So this is really worth the money, I would say. But this will conclude my overview of the device, and if you found this very helpful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and thanks for watching.